To Hannity, the Obama administration and Israel in a war of words. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle in for Sean tonight. After the United Nations passed a resolution last week condemning Israeli settlements, earlier today, Secretary of State John Kerry lectured and criticized America's ally in a foreign policy speech. Take a look.
Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect. The United States did, in fact, vote in accordance with our values, just as previous U.S. administrations have done at the Security Council before us. They failed to recognize that this friend, the United States of America, that has done more to support Israel than any other country, this friend that has blocked countless efforts to delegitimize Israel, cannot be true to our own values or even the stated democratic values of Israel. And we cannot properly defend and protect Israel if we allow a viable two-state solution to be destroyed before our own eyes. Here is a fundamental reality. If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both.
And hours later, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to Secretary Kerry. Watch this.
I must express my deep disappointment with the speech today of John Kerry, a speech that was almost as unbalanced as the anti-Israel resolution passed at the UN last week. Secretary Kerry paid lip service to the unremitting campaign of terrorism that has been waged by the Palestinians against the Jewish state for nearly a century. What he did was to spend most of his speech blaming Israel for the lack of peace. Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders. Israel's hand has been extended in peace to its neighbors from day one, from its very first day.
President-elect Donald Trump is also weighing in.
Israel's been treated very, very unfairly by a lot of different people. You look at resolutions in the United Nations, you take a look at what's happened. They're up for 20 reprimands, and other nations that are horrible places that treat people horribly haven't even been reprimanded.
And here now with reaction is Prime Minister Netanyahu's spokesperson, David Keyes. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Hannity. So a lot of reaction around the world today, given the comments of Secretary of State John Kerry. What is your position?
Israel was deeply, deeply disappointed with the speech, primarily because it didn't really focus on the core of the conflict. Secretary Kerry took up a lot of time blaming Israel for the supposed, crime of Jews living in their ancient homeland of Judea. But the actual core of the conflict remains this persistent Palestinian refusal to accept a Jewish state in any boundaries. And this comes after the Obama administration colluded with the Palestinians really behind Israel's back to pass this absolutely anti-Israel resolution that actually calls the Western Wall, if you can believe it, occupied Palestinian territory, the place where Jews have been and prayed towards for thousands of years. So I think what really needs to be asked of this administration is, will they veto any future resolution in their remaining time in office in the Security Council against the state of Israel, as this resolution was? It's a shame that the world's attention is not focused on Palestinian hate speech, on the refusal to accept any Jewish state in the Middle East, because if we can refocus the world's attention on that, I believe we can make true progress towards peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Now, given these stunning international developments for the Middle East here, has Prime Minister Netanyahu spoken to either President Barack Obama or President-elect Donald Trump?
The Israeli government, of course, is in touch with both the current administration and the incoming administration. But think of the absurdity of this speech, given just the recent history of our relations with the Palestinians. The Prime Minister has called literally hundreds of times to meet with President Abbas for peace talks without any preconditions. He invited President Abbas to the Israeli Knesset. He offered to go to the parliament in Ramallah. And all of those calls were turned down with a resounding no. And on the Palestinian side, the Palestinian president has said openly and publicly he will never recognize a Jewish state. They're naming soccer teams after mass murderers. Senior advisors are calling to slit the throats of Israelis wherever you find them, and the Palestinian government is actually paying anyone who murders an Israeli a monthly salary. So if you want to find the real barrier to peace, look no further than that rejectionism, that support for terror, and inciting this idea that one day there won't be a Jewish state here in the Middle East.
Well, there's also, Mr. Key's been a very bold statement suggesting that you have ironclad proof that the United States was complicit, in fact, in helping craft the UN resolution. What proof do you have of that?
Well, I can't share all the proof I have because it's of a sensitive nature, but needless to say, I have seen it myself with my own eyes. It's ironclad. It's true beyond a shadow of a doubt. There was a recently released transcript out of Egypt. I haven't read through the entire transcript, but it confirms, it tallies with what we have seen and understood from sources in the Arab world, that the United States was largely behind this push at the UN, this anti-Israel resolution at the Security Council. And it's a shame because it's a real abandonment of America's historic role protecting Israel at this deeply biased body that frankly delights in lambasting the Middle East one liberal democracy and doesn't quite have so much time for those hundreds of thousands of Syrians who have been butchered just in the last few years.
And certainly. Mr. Keys, will the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in fact, provide proof, proffer the evidence that you have, and provide that to President-elect Donald Trump and to the Obama administration?
Yes, we are going to share that with the new administration through the proper channels. And I, again, hope that the administration in its last few days is asked the question whether it will or it won't veto any future resolution dealing with Israel at the United Nations. I hope so because the body is deeply biased. Friends don't take friends to the Security Council, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said. And it's my fervent hope that Israelis and Palestinians can sit down across the table from one another in good faith, in the spirit of mutual recognition, of bringing people together, because everybody deserves to live in peace, Israelis and Palestinians alike. And it's an absolute tragedy that the Palestinian leadership has so consistently rejected the Prime Minister's calls for peace.
Well, it does sound like this is an issue of trust, that in fact you would share that information with President-elect Donald Trump, but not with the current administration, President Barack Obama or Secretary John Kerry.
Well, it's not really a matter of trust. The current administration knows precisely what it did, so it doesn't really need our information.
All right. Well, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Hannity tonight, Mr. Ally, Deputy Minister for Diplomacy in Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office, Ambassador Michael Oren. Ambassador, thanks for joining us tonight. Certainly a very interesting day in terms of the international developments, very significant in terms of relations between the United States and Israel. I'd like to get your reaction.
Good to be with you, Kimberly. It was a odd and very disturbing speech indeed. Secretary Kerry talks about the absence of a two-state solution, but fails to mention that the Palestinians have been offered a Palestinian state no less than 4 times in the past and have turned it down, each time mostly with violence. He goes on and on. About 80% of this speech, over an hour and a half, is dedicated to attacking Israeli settlements, but there's no mention that Israel left Gaza and ripped up 21 settlements in order to advance peace, and all we got was thousands of rockets fired at our civilians. He talks about the absence of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, and just sort of forgets to mention that the Palestinian Authority has refused to sit at the negotiating table with us for 8 years. And as my colleague David Keyes just said on your program, Prime Minister Netanyahu has again and again and again offered to sit with President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority without preconditions, anywhere, any time. A strange and disturbing speech. At the end of the day, he talks about as if he, Secretary of State John Kerry of the United States, knows better than the people of Israel what is best for them, and certainly better than their democratically elected leaders, myself included. Strange and disturbing.
As we sit here and reflect this evening on these international developments, what is your opinion of the legacy of the Obama administration on the talks and the relationship with Israel?
Well, the legacy will be twofold. It was a policy which, from day one, rewarded the Palestinians for not sitting at the negotiating table and created a situation where they had so much to gain by not negotiating with us because the administration would give them what they wanted. In the last UN resolution, it gave Mahmoud Abbas what he always wanted. It gave him the tools to fight us in international criminal courts and to sanction and isolate us. The other legacy will be the Iran nuclear deal. It was kind of strange, Kimberly.
Yes.
Secretary of State Kerry mentioned the closeness in the relationship between Israel and Sunni Arab states in the Gulf. He failed to mention that the major reason we have grown close is because of the Iranian nuclear deal. We're afraid of what American foreign policy has wrought in our region. Those will be the two major legacies: Iran nuclear deal and Israel facing the dangers of sanctions and boycotts.
And so what measures can the new administration under President President-elect Donald Trump take to restore the faith, the relationship with Israel, and undo the damage that has been wrought by the Iran nuclear deal and the measures by the UN Security Council?
Well, as I did talk about that in the book, in the Ally book, I thought the two major principles of the U.S.-Israel alliance has always been the principles of no daylight and no surprises. No daylight means we can have differences, and friends can have differences, but they're not made public. Friends do not make their differences public the way Secretary of State made our differences public tonight for an hour and a half on international television. And no surprises means that if the President or the Secretary of State is going to make a major statement on the Middle East and the way it impacts us, we have to know about it in advance. And I'll tell you, Kimberly, nobody in the Israeli government knew what the Secretary of State was going to say tonight. It was a complete surprise.
Yeah, certainly.
So we have to restore these two principles. The president-elect can come into office and make it clear that if anybody tries to boycott or sanctions the state of Israel, they're going to have to deal not just with Israel, they're going to have to deal with the United States of America. America remains the world's most powerful and the most financially robust power. I don't think anybody wants to, excuse the expression, mess with the United States.
No, you're absolutely right. I think President-elect Donald Trump has made it very clear that the United States respects and will stand by its strong ally in Israel. Deputy Minister Oren, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.